In this video, I'm reacting to the face-off between Ben Whittaker and Liam Cameron ahead of their rematch. Whittaker joked, Cameron opened up, but buried beneath the sarcasm and storytelling was a truth that I don't think Whittaker is quite ready to accept. Stick around with me to the end of this one, guys, as I try and unveil all the secrets and details that I noticed during this face-off between the two men. And in this video, I'll also reveal to you a key detail that was omitted from the interview that Sky Sports did not want you to hear. Let's go. Hello everyone and welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. We are in Whittaker Cameron 2 fight week, and this is a fight that I think a lot of us are looking forward to. Anytime there's a fight where there are lots and lots of unanswered questions, there's lots and lots of ambiguity, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen, that's when the anticipation is real, and that's where we can get properly hyped up and properly excited for a matchup. And this is a great example of that, you know. Ben Whittaker is a guy that has had so much hype around him. Everyone's seeing him as this massive talent, somebody they think can go all the way and become that next sort of flag bearer for British boxing. Liam Cameron, on the other hand, is someone who's had a completely inconsistent career. He's had losses, he's had extremely hard times, substance abuse, tragic loss. He is such a great example of someone who is down to earth and honest and truthful and has made an amazing comeback, and that just wins over the hearts and minds of people like nothing else. Especially in the UK, we absolutely love an underdog story. And in this one right now, I think that Liam Cameron, the way he carries and presents himself, he's kind of the people's champion. He's kind of the guy that I think most people will be rooting for in this fight. He's really won over the hearts and minds of the people that he's, come into contact with. Ben Whittaker, on the other hand, with his antics, with everything that's gone on, when you're that confident and braggadocious, when you're showboating that much in the ring, humiliating your opponents, it's going to paint you in a certain light. And when that is contrasted against the honesty and rawness of Liam Cameron, it doesn't make you look great, and it kind of makes you the villain. Plus, with the way that last fight ended, where I think we can pretty confidently say that Whittaker took the easier way out. When you slow it down frame by frame, you watch that moment. I've never seen anybody fall over the ropes before when they're pushed back by someone. And the way he looks back, he tips his head back. I think we can all agree at this point that he kind of deliberately enabled that flip out of the ring. We'll never know 100% without him confirming it. Although he did say some things in this face-off video that kind of make you think, I wonder what happened there. There was definitely a pattern of a tone of response I picked up from Whittaker that I will reveal and talk about in this analysis. Unfortunately for this one, guys, I don't have the footage because it's a Sky video and they are very, very pernickety about their intellectual property, and so I'm not going to risk it. But I will take you through the conversation and I will reveal to you the things that really stood out to me and how I assess and analyze them, because the big thing here is the psychology of the two men going into the fight. How does each man feel? Who's ready? Who's ready to go in there and perform to the maximum? Can Whittaker go in there and transform himself? If you want to go and check out my game film analysis, that is live. I've broken down everything Whittaker did wrong in that fight, and I've explained how I think he can box differently. There's a massive, massive ceiling of potential and room for improvement for Whittaker going into this rematch. And to make those necessary changes, he has to be honest about what didn't work the first time around. That's something we'll talk about in this video. And for Liam Cameron, he needs to come in there and be himself and do the same thing, because he was the one that was breaking down Whittaker. Before I get into this one, guys, don't forget to bang a like on the video. If you do like my content, please subscribe to A Guy Called Henry. If you're new, bang that notification bell and get your comments in the comments section below. Who do you think won this face-off? Who do you think came out on top in this head-to-head? Because at the end of the day, sometimes it doesn't mean anything, but sometimes it means everything. Look at Froch and Groves, the way that first fight went. When you can get inside your opponent's head, you can really, really affect their performance and impact the way that they fight. Not only that, but it also gives us an indication of whether or not that person has taken the rematch in the right way, whether they have got their mind correct, because there are mental scars when fighters lose. Look at Anthony Joshua after the first Andy Ruiz fight. He never seemed to quite recover from it. So I'm going to try and answer all those questions here. Now, the first thing that came up that really caught my attention was when Whittaker reaffirmed the comments that he made after the fight, which was that Cameron turned up at his absolute best and Whittaker turned up at his absolute worst. He doubled down on that statement and made it very clear that he still felt that way. And it's an interesting thing to conceive of, this idea that Whittaker couldn't have been any worse than he was against Cameron, and yet he was still in there with a chance, whereas Cameron only had a chance performing at his absolute highest level. And it was quite an interesting little interaction, because Liam Cameron said, you know what, I'll let him have that. And it was almost as if to say, if that's what you need to think mentally to cope here, then, go for it, mate, knock yourself out. But the reality is that Cameron then turned to the fact that he had broken his nose 4 weeks out from the fight. So he instantly gave an evidence factual reason, an evidence-based, factual reason why he can be better in this rematch. Because obviously breaking your nose is quite a damaging thing for a fighter. It means you can't breathe properly when you're training, you're in pain, and when you're sparring, obviously it kills. You don't want to get hit there, so you maybe don't even spar fully and properly. On the other hand, you had Whittaker, who wouldn't say why he turned up at his worst or why it was his worst performance. And that kind of sets the tone for this interview, for this face-off. Ben Whittaker was very, very avoidant, very, very sarcastic, very, very... I'd say he was almost condescending at times. He had a sort of snide smile, a sort of wry smile that he kept giving. It was a smirk is how I would describe it, was the word I'm looking for. Whereas Liam Cameron, on the other hand, was exactly what he is. And I think he actually is quite smart. And I think he knows how to turn the screw using what he's got, which is honesty, which is straight talking, which is being a real person. And I think he actually turned up the heat on Whittaker here a bit. And I'll explain how he did that as we move through my reaction to the interview, to the face-off. And there was actually a moment where Cameron said, Whittaker, what he's doing here is he's trying to get his mind right. He's trying to get his head right, talking this way about the first fight. And you could feel it in there. You sort of felt that Ben Whittaker was feeling his way through things, and he didn't really seem to know how to answer things. He didn't seem to know how to explain what happened in that last fight. Everything was turned into a joke, and everything was sort of trivialized. And this is something that I've seen Tyson Fury do a lot. And I think it's definitely, in my mind, a coping strategy. When you can't explain why something happened because your whole confidence is based on believing you're the best, and when that is questioned, when that is brought into debate, you can't quite explain it to yourself. You can't quite handle it. They always say that the best boxers have to be a little bit deluded. And this is evidence, further evidence that might be the mindset of Whittaker. The confidence comes from a degree of delusion. When that is shattered, when someone like Liam Cameron, who Whittaker had no regard for, no respect for going into that first fight, is able to do that to you, it makes you question everything. And he doesn't want to admit that he's gone there in his head, I don't think. And, he even trivialized that first fight, saying it was like two kids in Weatherspoons drunk and it was a very, very messy fight. Again, sort of saying, look, this wasn't me boxing at my best. This was a scrappy, messy affair. And Liam Cameron sort of moved to say that's I make guys do that. I make you fight messy. I draw you into a war. I make you get tired. This isn't something that you chose to do, Ben Whittaker. This isn't a case of you coming in and performing badly for no reason. I made you perform badly. The other tactic that Whittaker was using in this interview a lot was, as I say, there was the jokes, there was the little smiles, but there was also the avoidance, the refusal to answer. And there was a pattern around the difficult questions. Those were the three things that he would do. And that's an interesting pattern to pick up on, because I'll explain why down the road. But there was one thing he answered in particular that he did it with that really told me, a story. So Johnny Nelson specifically asked Whittaker if he felt the pressure of it being a massive event, and if he just felt the pressure to get in there and blast out Liam Cameron. And his response to that was just, all he could say was he was thinking about the new date in April, the fact that they're fighting this week. That was what his attention and his focus was on in this interview. Either, minimalizing, trivializing what was being said, or focusing on this new fight date, really refusing to get into the honest story of what happened in that first fight. And it's an interesting one. There's a bit where we talk about acceptance here, and Liam Cameron's the one who brings it up, and I think it's very clever, and it's where I would have gone if I was a fighter and I was doing this. So we'll talk about that. There was another interesting moment where Whittaker was directly asked if Liam Cameron hurt him with his punches. And Whittaker basically said, nah, he can't punch at all. He didn't hurt me. He can't hurt me. And Cameron very, very confidently stared back at him and said, yeah, I hurt him. I did. And then he even doubled down and said, you know what the best thing was? It wasn't even me going at full speed yet. And I could tell you were getting hurt. And I was only just starting to turn the screw. And honestly, if you watch the fight back, that last round, Whittaker starts to foul Cameron incessantly. And I break it down in my game film analysis video. As I say, link will be in the description. The number of low blows that he threw just before he flipped them out of the ring was absolutely ridiculous. And I think he would have been deducted a point very, very quickly. He received a warning, I believe. I don't think a point was actually deducted, but so many low blows. And, he was cutting the figure of somebody who was looking for answers. He couldn't find the right way to move forward, and he was definitely starting to gas. Liam Cameron was landing some lovely body shots. And when you're a fighter and you're in there with someone, you know when you've hurt them, because you hear the breath leave them. You hear them groan. You see them starting to breathe through their mouth. They do things like spit the gum shield out, which was another thing Whittaker did in that round as well. So Liam Cameron obviously isn't taking anything Whittaker says seriously here. And Whittaker just consistently set the bar in this face-off of not being truthful, of not being honest. And Cameron himself described the moment that they were flipped out of the ring. He said that he could feel he was about to stop him. He could feel him hurting him with the body shots. And as they went back to the ropes, he described how he saw his head tip back when he flipped them over the ropes. And Whittaker moved to try and act like Cameron was being really manipulative and calculated in the way he was presenting the story. And he started saying, oh, well, he obviously knows everything about everything. He's calculating everything to the nth degree. It was the 0.5 degree in the 45.7 seconds, and tried to make out like Cameron was being really, really analytical and painting a picture that was so specific that it didn't happen. That was his way of dealing with answering that scenario. And, when he was pressed on whether or not he flipped himself over the ropes, he started saying, yeah, I'm Ben Whittaker. That's me. I'm Whittaker. And he sort of cut in. And when he was asked, did you quit? When he asked Liam Cameron, Johnny Nelson asked Liam Cameron, he cut in. He was like, yeah, I quit. And it's that sort of little smirk, the insistence that like, yeah, that's the narrative. Fine. That's what it is. But, it's one thing to say, I'm doing that because you're going to all talk anyway, but he's never provided an explanation for anything, and no one has been able to provide an explanation for anything. And in the lack of evidence, to the contrary, we have to say that we think what we think was happening is actually what happened, and he doesn't have a way to answer and explain these things away. And again, he refused to answer. He started, and Liam Cameron cleverly pressed him, and he was like, well, your promoter says one thing and you've said nothing, so what you really should have done was sat down together and figured out your story and got it straight. And then Whittaker was like, oh, like Mike Tyson, it's spinal. I had a broken leg, a chipped spine. And again, it's taking it to an extreme to try and remove yourself from that question, to take away the onus to answer it correctly. He just turned it into a joke, and he's sort of like, I'm not engaging with this. By agreeing with everything they say, by being, humorous about it, it means that he doesn't have to say anything about it. And that, if you want to build confidence from the public, you're not going to get it. Everyone's going to continue to believe that that's actually what happened. All he could do, and all he could do was pretend that it was so ridiculous that he would just go along with what you were saying. And a continued part of that moment where he was talking about quitting was he said, Johnny said to him, so there's no way you could carry on. And he just said, sadly. And he sort of had that smirk, and he's not shaking his head. He's like, sadly, I couldn't continue. And it's like, you're saying this, but mate, you actually couldn't continue. And we actually don't know what your injury was. So this is the strategy you've come into the face-off with. But at the end of the day, these are all relevant and valid points. And the fact is that I don't know how much this strategy for the face-off is going to impact the result. All I know is that it's not going to win him many fans, because what may be happening in his head right now is he's thinking, I know I quit. I know I wasn't injured. I know I took the easy way out. I know that quit was there in me for that fight, but I also know that I can perform much, much better. I have gone away and figured out what the issues are. We'll talk about his trainer change in a moment, but it may be that he's actually gone in and decided, look, I know I've done everything I need to do to fix what happened in there, and I'm going to come in here and act like I've not accepted it, and therefore he's going to believe that it will be as easy a fight for him as the first one was, or, as easy. It wasn't easy for Cameron. Still, it was still a tough challenge, but it will be a similar performance from Whittaker, because nothing will really have changed. The fact is that I think he will have changed a lot. I think the one thing that you can't undo easily is the mental scars from the flip out the ring. I think that the quitting part is the difficult part. That is the thing that I think he will really struggle to deal with in this rematch. Technical changes are a lot easier to make than mental changes. That's what I believe. I mean, everyone is different, but generally speaking, that's what I believe about fighters. And when he shook his head and said, sadly, this was when Liam Cameron cut in again with a very clever comment. And again, I think Liam Cameron is almost weaponizing his honesty a little bit. I think that he knows why people like him. He knows what he is. And he's continuing to speak the truth. And he's like, look, I'm just being honest. And look, at the end of the day, I actually agree with him. I think he's got Ben Whittaker's psyche down to a T, because Cameron said, look, Johnny, this is where you've got him. He hasn't got the answers. And the reason that he is essentially behaving the way he is when you ask him, he doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know how to explain what happened to him that night. And do you know what? Liam Cameron might well be right. Ben Whittaker might still not be able to explain how the hell that happened to him. At the same time, I think the trainer change suggests a lot. And Liam Cameron even went on to say that he can change everything by admitting his faults, because that's how you get better as a fighter. And this is exactly what we spoke about before the Fury-Usyk rematch, was the reluctance from Fury to accept what happened in that first fight, to accept that he lost, is a large part of why a lot of people were worried that he wouldn't be able to win the rematch, was because he wouldn't make the required changes. Because if you think you won, then why would you do anything differently? If you can accept that I was beaten well, then I need to be very different in this rematch. That's the concern here for Whittaker. And then we sort of transitioned into the most honest part of the interview for both guys. You know, Whittaker's talking about how he came from a tough working class background. That's why he grafts so hard, which very much trivialized his earlier comments about how in the first camp he just played PlayStation and barely did anything. Look, it was nice to hear him talk candidly like that, but at the same time, next to Liam Cameron, who is so honest and is so consistently honest, it didn't mean as much in that moment because he hasn't been honest throughout the interview. You can't pick and choose when to be honest. It kind of creates a confusing picture of you. It makes you seem quite complicated and less accessible to fans, I feel, whereas Liam Cameron is so consistently open and honest. When he spoke about, he said, and I'll quote him directly, he said that he spoke specifically about the loss of his stepdaughter, his substance abuse, and he just said it's made him such a better person. And Johnny Nelson pushed him on it, and he said, and Cameron ended up saying that, yeah, he's fighting to keep away the person he was back then. And he said something so endearing. He said, I have a chicken wrap every day. I post on Instagram. People laugh at me, but I don't break my routine for anything. And it's that attention to the small things, the small relatable details, the things that make him really human, that just make him so likable. It reminds me of Dave Allen a lot, actually, the way he said that, or any like good working class lad that just talks about the normal things. I love that, and I think he's a great guy, actually, Liam Cameron, and that honesty and that truthfulness shone through in the interview. Again, it doesn't mean he's going to win this fight at all. But I think that he, with this mindset, will achieve the most he possibly can with what he's got left at this age, with everything that's happened to him, with what his experiences are. And I do believe these experiences have built him into a much better, much more resilient fighter. The fact is, Liam Cameron, he's been a pro for a lot longer than Whittaker. He's lost, so it's easier to be open and honest when you've already lost. The fear of that thing is kind of gone, so you don't have to be as in delusion as much, I don't believe anyway. Interestingly, Whittaker then went on to compare the calmness he feels now to when he won Olympic silver. And that was off the back of him talking about how they were asking Cameron about how it's been so busy for him, how his life has changed. And Whittaker's saying, look, it's been like that for me since day one. And he said he actually really enjoyed the time off social media, away from the noise, away from the hype. And he almost sort of made you feel like he might have regretted it a little bit, what he's built around him. And it was a hint to the fact that maybe he has been feeling the pressure a little bit here. And honestly, I would not be surprised if he was. I mean, it's immense pressure. It's immense pressure when you put yourself in that position to be the villain, I suppose. Showboaters are seen as the villain generally. You know, it's not respectable to your opponent to behave that way. And oftentimes, fans will either like you or they'll really, really hate you. You become like Marmite. You become a divisive character. And it seems like Whittaker has almost been a bit relieved to be away from that for a little bit. Back like it was when he was on the Olympic team, and I think he feels like he performs better when it's calm around him. Now we should discuss the trainer situation, because this was interesting, because Whittaker basically denied that the trainer change was a reaction to the loss. Cameron was like, look, he knows that he didn't perform well. He knows that he was losing. That's why he's changed trainer. He was questioned on it, and Whittaker was like, no, look, I was with my old amateur coach for the last fight. Things didn't work out with Sugar Hill, and it just so happened that I was with him. Now, as I understand it, Joby Clayton is Ben Whittaker's godfather, and he was the head coach for that fight. A bit mad, because like you're basically saying that, you know, that camp was a bit of a mess. Whittaker kind of spoke about how he was doing whatever he wanted. There wasn't much structure to it, all this sort of thing. And not great look for Joby Clayton, is it? But at the same time, if it's true, I suppose. And yeah, but for sure, I think again, go and check out my game form analysis. I've really broken down in that video what I think Whittaker will do in this fight and what I think Andy Lee will get him doing based on how his fighters perform. And I believe Andy Lee will get the best out of Ben Whittaker eventually. This might be too soon, but I think that they suit each other very well for what Whittaker's got. But anyway, Whittaker said it was coincidental. I personally don't buy that. I think, I mean, he even kind of contradicted himself slightly, because he said, yeah, we were just going along, seeing how long we could do it for, and then we've made the change. And it's like, okay, well, you got to the point where you realized you couldn't do it anymore. You've made the change because it was necessary. So I don't buy that. I don't agree with that, and I don't buy that. I think he's done it because of the loss. And I think that the change of coach is very revealing. And I think that, again, it means that you can kind of disregard a lot of what's happening here. I think that you can kind of read into it and say, no, you know what? Okay. Maybe he's behaving like he hasn't accepted what happened in that first fight. But I actually think the switch of trainer means I think he knows full well what happened. And he doesn't want to come out in public and admit it. Honestly, if you're in his position, can you really admit it? You kind of give the opponent a massive psychological edge if they know for sure that they made you quit. So I get it. I understand why he's done it. And, you know, even though I don't think as I said, I don't think it's going to win him any fans, I get why he's acted the way he has in the interview, because how else is he supposed to do it? How else is he supposed to explain these things that are just ridiculous? The flip out the ring, mental, the fact he quit it all, the lack of performance levels, all these things are difficult. I mean, the big thing that Liam Cameron kept leaning back on in this interview, in this face-off, was The fact that Whittaker was gassed, the fact that he was tired, and Cameron, any time that he had a chance to, he'd bring it back to that level of fatigue he must have been feeling. He actually had a great line where he described it as being like a tattoo. Like, you go back in because you want one every time, but you forget the pain. Then you're there and you're like, damn, why am I doing this? And I thought it was quite a funny analogy, and it worked. And I think overall, I felt that, Ben Whittaker could be in denial, but at the very least, he's giving nothing to Cameron. He's giving nothing to the public about what actually happened. Maybe later in his career, he'll talk about it. Who knows? And the way he responded was a coping strategy. It was a way of getting away and, deviating attention from those big questions. Cameron, without question, the more thoughtful and truthful, not thoughtful, the more truthful of the two, the more honest of the two. And again, it just makes you like him even more. And he does feel psychologically like he's in control of this. And it would be hard not to be with the amount of crap that happened with Whittaker last fight, that he just refuses to engage in and explain, really. And overall, I thought that Whittaker cut a frustrated figure at times. I mean, he seemed almost frustrated he was being asked those questions. He kept a calm demeanor, but I don't think he wanted to talk about those things. And he tried to undermine, I think he went in there essentially with the mission to try and undermine Liam Cameron's confidence and belief in what he was able to do in that last fight. Every time he said, I was hurting him, every time he said he was tired, he had a little smile on his face. But guys, anyone can go back and see what was happening. So I don't think that will affect Liam Cameron's belief in what was going on. Now, the final two things I want to talk about. At the end of the interview, Whittaker pulled out an egg. They were asked if they were going to shake hands. Cameron went to shake his hand and Whittaker pulled out an egg. It was a little funny joke, a little funny moment. And they had a bit of banter. Cameron was like, I was ready to dodge that. And Whittaker was like, you're too slow for that. And they both laughed. And it was just a funny little moment, wasn't it? I didn't think too much of it. Obviously, a reference to Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn and their egg incident. And, it was just a little moment, wasn't it? And I felt like that was almost him trying to reassert a little bit of control at the end of the interview, end it on his own terms to a degree, but it was what it was. It didn't mean much. But the big thing that I mentioned in my intro here, and the thing that I want to talk about, is this key detail, this key thing that apparently Boxer and Sky banned Liam Cameron for talking about, and that was the debate over the number of rounds. Now, look, TalkSport Boxing can be a load of crap at the best of times. But one thing they did very well was they gave Liam Cameron a platform to go and talk about this dispute over the 10 or 12 rounds. And what's ended up happening is that it's going to be a 10-round fight rather than a 12-rounder. I'm sure most of you heard by now, but if you haven't, 2 contracts were sent out. Apparently, Whittaker signed for a 10-round fight and Cameron signed for a 12-round fight. Or apparently they'd both signed for a 12-round fight. Boxer realized the legal team had made a mistake. It was a generic contract, and they should have changed it to 10 when they hadn't. So apparently they've ended up having to pay Liam Cameron money to take this as a 10-round fight, which is a monumental cock-up, and I can't believe that actually happened. It's absolutely crazy to me that happened. But anyway, just, amateur hour or what. But, it happened and we move on. But it does reveal a weakness. This guy, at the end of the day, is not willing to do 12 rounds. So the fatigue thing is, again, it reinforces that belief. And I'm sure Liam Cameron would have wanted to say in his interview, this is why you want 10, not 12. You were tired. You can't do 12 rounds. I'm ready to do 12 rounds. I want 12 rounds. So that's an interesting component. The fact that they weren't allowed to speak about it is an interesting component. And I guess that's because there was a dispute going on. But that was the key thing that was omitted and hidden from the public in this interview. They wanted to cover that up for sure. I'm absolutely certain about that. But look, Cameron got the opportunity to go and talk about it. And I think that really would have added even more fuel to the fire around this idea that Whittaker was gassed in the fight. But anyway, guys, let me know what you made of this face-off. I thought it was very interesting. I enjoyed it. I like Liam Cameron even more after watching it. I don't know if this is going to bear any influence on the result of this rematch. I think that there's more information that will help decide things in my game form analysis. I do think this will come down more to tactical and technical details and the kind of training camp that Whittaker has had. Mindset, of course, is super important, but we've made our observations here. Now we'll find out what these things mean for real on fight night. But I will definitely be doing more videos throughout the week about this. I will be doing a final prediction closer to the fight for sure. And I might release some bits of the game film analysis as well, so you can see them in individual bits. I know it's quite long to watch sometimes. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think. Bang a like on the video, subscribe to a guy called Henry, and as I always say, on to the next one.